Do you doubt that the U.S. Will make a similar move? What's your take?
Well, I think what we've really seen now is quite a few projects underway, both in the US and abroad, where central banks are beginning to explore the development of their own digital currencies. So we've seen that in places like China. We've seen the development of the digital dollar project beginning to get some traction here in the US. But ultimately, this is not necessarily something that should be construed or understood to be a competitor with decentralized protocols like Bitcoin, but rather I do see in the future that we will see sovereign currencies, fiat currencies, do make the move onto a blockchain-based system.
So how is this uncertainty impacting where you're placing your bets? I mean, do you have any plans to pitch a tent on Bitcoin Beach in El Salvador anytime soon?
I think this has been a really interesting time in the market. Seeing moves like what we're seeing in El Salvador, seeing an environment where we have some of the world's most followed, most famous investors publicly coming out in support of Bitcoin, seeing major corporations begin to add Bitcoin to their balance sheets. This is an environment unlike we've ever seen before around this asset class. And I certainly think the last 18 plus months for many people in the investment community have really solidified the staying power that digital currencies now have, and investors are now waking up to the potential that they can provide to their portfolios.
Now, I just spoke with Coinbase co-founder Fred Ursum of the crypto venture capital firm Paradigm, who's legitimately concerned that China will surpass the US in crypto, and especially when it comes to regulation. What do you think?
Well, I think what we're seeing here in the US is a regulatory regime that has been very in tune with cryptocurrency. And, certainly firms like Grayscale are a really strong example of a firm that's working within the asset class, but also within the existing regulatory framework. And what you're seeing is now guidance that has really given investors the confidence they need to approach and be involved in the asset class, whether it's SEC, CFTC, IRS, Treasury, FinCEN, you name it. And what we have seen in other parts of the world, like China, is a stance that I think is a little bit more prohibitive at times around decentralized currencies like Bitcoin. So, to Fred's point, and I do sometimes agree with that stance, that there is a little bit of perhaps an arms race around this as to which countries and which regulatory regimes are going to be most accommodative to the innovation that's taking place around these types of assets, and ensuring that the companies and the people that are using them kind of get that first mover advantage. So there is some element of time being of the essence around some of those initiatives.
Well, and speaking of that, we're expecting an SEC decision in the near future on Bitcoin ETFs. That decision was expected this week. It was pushed. Where do you expect that decision to land?
Well, we've been engaged with the SEC on Bitcoin ETFs dating all the way back to 2016. We are 100% committed to converting our flagship fund, Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, into an ETF when the regulatory environment is ready to make those kinds of approvals. And from our engagement with regulators and our seat within the financial services and crypto communities, we're really encouraged by a lot of the progress that's being made. But I think the SEC has been very, very clear that there are certain aspects of the crypto ecosystem that they're looking to achieve a certain level of maturation. And so they're trying to ensure that these markets, and inherently before they approve products around them, are void of manipulation, have surveillance sharing agreements in place in the spot market, and ultimately may have some of the same types of investor protections in place that they may have around equities and other asset classes that they also oversee. So while we're certainly making progress, I think clearly we're not quite there just yet.
Now, obviously, there's been a ton of volatility. Are we back on the upswing, or are we going to see some more lows before we get back to a high up cycle?
Well, I think based on investor demand, we've seen this time and again. We've seen either leverage coming out of the ecosystem that's caused a correction in the price of Bitcoin, or other news or other events affecting the price of Bitcoin. But typically the investor behavior has been one of using these pullbacks in price opportunistically to add to their positions, right? If they fundamentally still believe in the same investment thesis, but that investment is now available to them at 10 or maybe 15% cheaper than it was a week or two or a month ago, then investors often use these types of periods of time to really add to those positions and ultimately build a diversified portfolio, when you see those pullbacks.
What do you think of Elon Musk's latest comments? I mean, does the whiplash bother you, saying one thing then saying another?
Well, you're talking to someone that's been around crypto for about 8 years now. And so I've seen no shortage of movements in the crypto price. But I do think some of the commentary that Elon Musk has made has really been focused on ESG and some of the carbon footprint and energy consumption concerns around Bitcoin mining. And I think when it comes to that, it's really important that we stick to the facts. I think the latest statistic is about 75% of miners are using renewable energy as part of their energy mix. So that could be hydro, that could be wind, it could be solar. And it's important to zoom out a little bit, Emily, and realize we're only 10 or 12 years into the life cycle of crypto assets. And so it definitely stands to reason that this is an opportunity for this industry to continue to innovate, continue to reduce its carbon footprint, and ultimately kind of rise to the challenge that's being presented to it.